مرحبا السادة حضور ملتقى الاستثمار الرياضي، الملتقى الذي تنظمه وزارة الرياضة بشراكة مع الغرفة التجارية مع غرفة الرياض. يزعلون إذا قلنا غرفة تجارية، غرفة الرياض، وتحت رعاية سمو وزير الرياضة الأمير عبدالعزيز بن تركي الفيصل، الذي كان حريصا على الحضور إلى هذا الملتقى والالتقاء بالجميع وكذلك سماع كل هذه الأفكار، ولكن ظروف السفر يمكن حالت عن وجوده. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الرؤية احتفلت مع المجتمع بكافة أطيافه بالسنة الخامسة، بتمام العام الخامس من بدايتها. هذه الرؤية التي شملت كل قطاعات المرتبطة بالناس، المرتبطة بالمجالات المختلفة. الرياضة إحدى هذه القطاعات، الرياضة التي حدثت فيها تحولات واضحة، تحولات بدت أكثر جودة، تحولات بدت اليوم الناس تلحظها على المستوى المباشر وأيضا تلمسها على أرضها. طيب، خلينا نقول فقط كذا بعض التحولات نذكر فيها، أكيد كلنا سمعنا بها من فترة، وأكيد أن الوزارة والجهات ذات العلاقة تحدثها كل مرة، ولكن أبرز التحولات يعني القرار الكبير الذي نقل الرياضة من مرحلة إلى مرحلة، وهو مرحلة أن الرياضة والتي وصلت إلى هيئة في مرحلة من المراحل، اليوم هي وزارة بوزير يملك حقيبة وزارية يتواجد بجانب القيادة في مجلس الوزراء بشكل أسبوعي، ما يعجل بعمل الوزارة ويحدث النقلات النوعية المنتظرة. هذا على مستوى إنشاء الوزارة المستقلة. أيضا عملت الرؤية على بعض المستهدفات التي تقدم مجتمع حيوي وصحي، تم توسيع قاعدة الممارسين مثلا. اليوم زادت النسبة من 13% إلى 19%، وهذه من أهداف الرؤية والرقم في تزايد. أيضا أعقب ذلك إطلاق استراتيجية دعم الأندية في 2019، هذا الإطلاق الذي ساهم بتحقيق منجزات عظيمة على جميع المستويات، على مستوى الألعاب، على مستوى الأندية، على مستوى الرياضة بشكل عام. ارتفاع متوسط درجة الحوكمة في الأندية إلى 54% خلال 2020 و2021، زيادة في الألعاب المختلفة بنسبة 755% تقريبا في الأندية المتفاعلة خلال هذه الفترة. ساهمت الاستراتيجية أيضا في توفير ما يقارب من 4000 وظيفة، هذا الرقم أكثر من ضعف وزيادة لما كانت عليه الأمور قبل أن تنطلق الاستراتيجية في 2019. حققت الرياضة زيادة في نسبة المساهمة في الناتج المحلي، وذلك من 2.4 مليار ريال إلى 6.5 مليار ريال، بما سيساهم أيضا في تعزيز الاستدامة المالية للقطاع. وأيضا نحو صناعة أبطال أولمبيين كمنصة الرؤية، تم زيادة عدد الاتحادات الرياضية من 32 اتحاد في 2016 إلى 64 في 2020، واليوم نقف عند 92 اتحاد، وهذا رقم ضخم على مستوى التحولات في 3-4 سنوات الأخيرة فقط، ونقلة نوعية كبيرة. مع إطلاق خدمة تصاريح الصالات والمراكز الرياضية في 2017، وصل عدد التراخيص في 2020 إلى 1549 مركز، بالإضافة إلى تدشين منصة للتراخيص في 2020. هذه المنصة خرجت حتى الآن قرابة 100 ترخيص. وتماشيا مع أهداف الرؤية، تم العمل على إنشاء شركات خاصة للاستثمار الرياضي في الأندية، فصرنا اليوم نشاهد شركات خاصة بأسماء الأندية. تحولات كبيرة في المجال الرياضي، تحولات كبيرة على مستوى القطاع، على مستوى الاستثمار في الرياضة. هذا الأمر زي ما قلنا في البداية الناس بدأت تلحظه، ولأنه حكاية الاستثمار في الرياضة نسمع بها من سنين. كان الجماعة في مقالاتهم، في أفكارهم تطرح مثل هذه الأفكار، ولكن كنا نشعر بأنه في جاب كبير ما بين الناس وفهمهم للاستثمار الرياضي. اليوم الناس نفسها صارت تنتظر من أنديتها ومن اتحاداتها وحتى من الوزارة المعنية، تنتظر منها مثل هذا الأمر. صارت تعمل بنشمارك مع بعض الدول وين وصلت، مع بعض الأندية في العالم، مع بعض الاتحادات، وتشوف أيضا منافسات، وبالتالي تقيس أيضا نجاحات هذا القطاع من خلال الاستثمار الرياضي ومدى جاذبيته أصلا للمستثمر وبقية المهتمين بهذا المجال. إذن التحديات كبيرة لتحقيق أهداف الرؤية، لتحقيق أهداف سمو سيدي ولي العهد، والذي يحرص بشكل مباشر على أن تكون هذه الأهداف محققة، وهو رسم أو وضع البوصلة الكاملة للعاملين في مجال الرياضة. في اليوم وزير الرياضة وفريقه في الوزارة، اليوم أيضا المعنيين بالوزارة المعنيين بالرياضة حتى من خلال الغرفة التجارية واللجنة الرياضة فيها لجنة الاستثمار الرياضي. أعتقد أنه اليوم العمل أصبح تكاملي أكثر، وصرنا نجلس مثل هالجلسات مثل هالملتقيات حتى على الأقل نخرج بتوصيات حقيقية تفيد الفكرة العامة، وهو تطوير الاستثمار الرياضي وجعله في مصاف في مكانه الطبيعي الذي يتواءم مع الرؤية ومع بقية القطاعات. إذن الفرص واعدة لجعل هذا الاستثمار الرياضي يعود بالنفع على القطاع والمحتوى المحلي والمجتمع. هذا ما نقدم به. واليوم عندنا إن شاء الله راح نسمع لبيوت خبرة أجنبية، وراح يكون عندنا جلسات حوارية، 3 جلسات حوارية، راح يكون في ورشة عمل في النهاية. فإحنا اليوم قدامنا إن شاء الله ساعات، ساعات مليانة بالفكرة، ساعات مليانة بتطوير أيضا الأفكار الموجودة، وكذلك أنه كل الأطراف العملية الاستثمارية في الرياضة يحكون مع بعض ويسمعون من بعض، فبالتالي نستطيع أن نخرج بتوصيات حقيقية. ولكن قبل أن نبدأ كل هذا خلونا نستمع للقرآن الكريم وهو خير بداية.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم.
وعلم آدم الأسماء كلها ثم عرضهم على الملائكة فقال أنبئوني بأسماء هؤلاء إن كنتم صادقين. قالوا سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم.
صدق الله العظيم. إذن في غرفة الرياض هذا المكان الذي خرجت منها الكثير من التحولات الكبيرة والمشاريع الكبرى، المشاريع الوطنية، والذي يحتضن هذه المناسبة ويجعل يمكن زي ما قلنا أطراف العملية الاستثمارية في الرياضة وفي غيرها أكيد يتواجدون في هذا المكان لتبادل الأفكار والحديث والهموم، وكل هذا سيكون معنا خلال الساعات القادمة. وزارة الرياضة وهي المعنية الأولى بالعمل الرياضي، ويمكن زي ما قلنا وزير الرياضة وحرصه المباشر سمو الأمير عبدالعزيز بن تركي الفيصل لديه بهذه المناسبة كلمة يوجهها لكم ويلقيها نيابة عنه معالي مساعد وزير الرياضة الأستاذ عبدالإله الدلاك.
نيابة عن صاحب السمو الملكي الأمير عبدالعزيز بن تركي الفيصل وزير الرياضة، يسعدني مشاركتكم اليوم بهذه المناسبة المهمة، ملتقى الاستثمار الرياضي، والذي يسلط الضوء فيه على أهمية الشراكة بين الأندية الرياضية والقطاع الخاص وسبل تعزيزها، بما يسهم في تحقيق مستهدفات الرؤية الطموحة، رؤية المملكة 2030. إن الرياضة كانت ولا تزال دائما عمادا أساسيا في اقتصاديات الدول المتقدمة، واحد أهم ركائز النهوض بالاستثمار وازدهاره. وفي بلادنا المملكة العربية السعودية نعيش بفضل من الله عز وجل عصر زاهر في كافة المجالات، ثم بالدعم السخي الكبير في قطاع الرياضة الذي نحظى به من قبل قيادتنا الرشيدة حفظها الله، والمتابعة والاهتمام المستمرين من قبل سمو سيدي صاحب السمو الملكي ولي العهد الأمير محمد بن سلمان بن عبد العزيز حفظه الله. كما أن مواكبة خطط ومناهج التطور العالمي في تحويل الرياضة إلى صناعة أصبح لله الحمد واقعا ملموسا بفضل الله سبحانه وتعالى، ثم بالبرامج والمبادرات التي حملتها رؤية المملكة 2030 للوصول إلى مجتمع حيوي والبيئة المحفزة للاستثمار الرياضي، بما ينعكس على الاقتصاد الوطني والمساهمة فيه بشكل فعال. طيب، ونحن في الرياضة وبتوجيهات مستمرة من سمو وزير الرياضة نؤكد دوما دعمنا وتشجيعنا لكافة المبادرات والشراكات القائمة مع المستثمرين والقطاع الخاص، من خلال تفعيل البرامج وجلب الرعاة التي تعود بالنفع على الجانبين وفق استراتيجيات دقيقة تزيد المداخيل في الأندية بشكل عام وترفع المستويات الاحترافية في العمل. وفي الختام نأمل أن يحقق هذا الملتقى الأهداف المرجوة منه بحضور نخبة مميزة من مسؤولي القطاعات الحكومية والقطاع الخاص ومنسوبي الأندية الرياضية في المملكة. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
إذن هذه كلمة وزير الرياضة ألقاها نيابة عن معالي مساعد وزير الرياضة الأستاذ عبدالإله الدلاك، حاضنة هذا يعني الملتقى وشريك وزارة الرياضة في إنتاج مثل هذه الجلسات وهذه الفقرات. غرفة الرياض وكلمة بهذه المناسبة يلقيها الأستاذ عبدالله الخريف عضو مجلس إدارة غرفة الرياض.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. يسرني أن أرحب بكم في ملتقى الاستثمار الرياضي والذي تنظمه وزارة الرياضة بالتعاون مع الغرفة ممثلة بلجنة الاستثمار الرياضي، والذي يأتي في وقت تعيش فيه المملكة وبقطاعاتها المختلفة انتعاشا اقتصاديا يشمل جميع القطاعات والأنشطة ولله الحمد، ومن أبرزها القطاع الرياضي الذي بات يحقق منجزات مختلفة سواء على مستوى الأنظمة أو استقطاب الفعاليات والمواسم الرياضية المختلفة، وهو ما أصبح يحمل معه الكثير من الفرص الاستثمارية الجاذبة. ولقد كان لوزارة الرياضة بقيادة صاحب السمو الملكي الأمير عبدالعزيز بن تركي الفيصل منجزات مهمة في سبيل تنظيم القطاع الرياضي والنهوض به بمقومات وتوفير منتجات عصرية ومنشآت وتحقيق تميز محلي وعالمي يستقطب الرياضيين من كل مكان في العالم، مما يتيح فرص متوالية وأرضية قوية للراغبين في الدخول في المجال الاستثمار الرياضي. الحضور الكريم، لقد استلهمت غرفة الرياض دور المشاريع والاستثمارات الرياضية، حيث سعت من خلال تبني تأسيس لجنة تعنى بالاستثمار الرياضي لتواكب الدعم السخي الذي يجده القطاع الرياضي والشبابي من مقام سيدي خادم الحرمين الشريفين الملك سلمان بن عبد العزيز وولي عهده الأمين صاحب السمو الملكي الأمير محمد بن سلمان بن عبد العزيز حفظهم الله، مما يسهم في تعزيز بيئة الاستثمار وخلق مزيد من الفرص أمام القطاع الخاص لتوسيع قواعد العمل الرياضي. وإننا لنرى تجمعنا في هذا اليوم وبوجود كوكبة من المسؤولين ومجتمع الأعمال ذو العلاقة في قطاع الرياضة فرصة للتباحث حول أفضل السبل والوسائل والفرص التي يمكن استثمارها. كما أن غرفة الرياض وبحرص رئيس وأعضاء مجلس الإدارة تعمل من خلال الشراكة مع القطاع الحكومي على خدمات قطاعات الاستثمار الواعدة، وفي مقدمتها قطاع الرياضة الذي يشهد نمواً متواصلاً. ونرحب بكل رأي أو مقترح لتعزيز جوانب الاستثمار بما يرفد اقتصادنا الوطني ويسهم في تحقيق مستهدفات رؤية المملكة 2030. مرة أخرى نسعد بتواجدكم، آملين أن يحقق هذا الملتقى الفائدة المرجوة منه، وشاكرين لكم اهتمامكم، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
الآن مع كلمة رئيس لجنة الاستثمار الرياضي بغرفة الرياض الأستاذ سلطان الشيخ، وحديث بخصوص هذه الملفات ودورهم أيضا في تنظيم هذا الملتقى.
بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. السلام عليكم جميعا. في البداية نود توجيه الشكر لصاحب السمو الملكي الأمير عبدالعزيز بن تركي الفيصل وزير الرياضة على تشريفه ولرعاية هذه الفعاليات الملتقى، سائلين المولى عز وجل أن يوفقنا وإياكم أجمعين لما فيها خير. لا شك أن الاستثمار الرياضي أصبح من أهم الأسس الاقتصادية في عالمنا اليوم، باعتبار الرياضة رمز للصحة والقوة والعقل السليم ولجودة الحياة ككل. وبالنسبة لواقع البنية والاستثمار الرياضي في المملكة العربية السعودية فهو بفضل الله أولا، ثم بفضل المقومات والممكنات التي أتاحتها رؤية المملكة 2030 والدعم والرعاية من مقام خادم الحرمين الشريفين وسمو ولي عهده الأمين يحفظهم الله، يسير في الطريق الصحيح ليشكل علامة فارقة بالمقياس الرياضي العالمي. الحضور الكريم، لقد أصبح الاستثمار الرياضي بأرضيته الخصبة من العناصر الواعدة بما فيه من فرص، إلا أنه يواجه بعض التحديات، ولهذا كان للجنة الاستثمار الرياضي في غرفة الرياض تحركات واجتماعات على عدة أصعدة شملت مسؤولين في الجهات الحكومية المشرعة والمنظمة وقطاع الأعمال الذي يعمل في المجال الرياضي أو غير الرياضي، بحيث اعتمدت اللجنة في أنشطتها ليس فقط بالبحث في عوائق القطاع وتعظيم استثماراته الحالية، بل في كيفية وضع التصورات ورفع التوصيات لتحفيز وتشجيع المستثمرين في القطاع الخاص للدخول في استثمارات جديدة في هذه الصناعة. وفي هذا اليوم وبوجودنا جميعا يحدون الأمل لوضع الأطر وأسس التعاون والتشاور لما فيه تعزيز وتطوير واقع استثمارنا الرياضي، لا سيما مع التوسع الكبير في الأنشطة والفرص المتاحة. الدور الرئيسي لغرفة الرياض ممثلة بلجنة الاستثمار الرياضي دائما وأبدا هو سد الفجوة التي تحدث دائما ما بين القطاع الخاص والقطاع العام. هناك فرص استثمارية نريد البحث عرضها على المستثمرين المحتملين، لا يشترط تواجد أو عمل القطاع الخاص في مجال الرياضي، لأن الفرص في المجال الرياضي كثيرة تتنوع، إما في مجال الغذائي أو مجال الصناعي أو مجال الطاقة وغير ذلك. فلذلك هناك فرص كثيرة نود عرضها وتداولها، ونستمع اليوم من الجهات المشرعة والمنظمة على أحدث الأنظمة والأسس والقوانين واللوائح، وهناك ممثلين للأندية وهناك ممثلين من القطاع الخاص، ونأمل من خلال شبكة التواصل التي تحدث اليوم والتي ستمتد بإذن الله الفترة القادمة، بالإضافة للتفاعل الغرف المشاركة اليوم غرفة جدة وغرفة الشرقية، نأمل بحول الله وقوته أن نصل إلى الهدف المنشود، وهو التعزيز الاستثمار وتعزيز البيئة الخصبة للاستثمار الرياضي في المملكة العربية السعودية. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
عن التفاعل ما بين القطاع العام وكذلك والقطاع الخاص في التجربة الدولية ومن المنظور الدولي، وكذلك تاريخ التطور التجاري الرياضي حول العالم وكذلك فوائد مشاركة القطاع الخاص بالرياضة. ندعوكم لهذا العرض المفصل والمليء بالتجارب العالمية وقصص النجاح مع بريدج، وهو مدير مجموعة الأعمال الرياضية في ديليوث، وديفيد وهو سفير دولي للدوري الإنجليزي وللاتحاد الإنجليزي لكرة القدم، وكذلك شريك ونائب رئيس نادي أرسنال لكرة القدم سابقا، كما عمل نائب رئيس للاتحاد الإنجليزي لكرة القدم في فترة سابقة. نترككم الآن مع التيم واللقاء. تيم. How are you, team?
Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. I hope that you can all hear me at the event there, and I would like to say good morning from here in the UK. It's an absolute pleasure to join you at the event today. I would like to apologise that we are not there in person. Clearly, the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic makes travel very challenging at the moment. But I do hope that all of you and all of your family remain healthy through the challenging times, and hopefully we'll be back in person in the near future. In the meantime, you get to join me in my home here, and you can see my own love of my football club, Manchester City, in the background. And we're fortunate enough to be joined as well by David Dean, the ex-Arsenal chairman, and we won't talk about the result from Saturday during the discussion. My job today is to just set a little bit of context for the exciting day that you have ahead. Everybody knows and everybody understands that the power of sport is so significant. And in Saudi Arabia at the moment, the opportunity that you have in front of you is absolutely huge. And the Ministry of Sport know that better than anybody. And I think it's a real testament to the development and the way that you're approaching the overall development of sport, that you're bringing together key parties today to discuss this important topic. Just by way of brief introduction, my name is Tim Bridge, and I'm a director in Deloitte's Specialist Sports Business Group. I've worked in the Kingdom now since around 2015 as a technical advisor to the Ministry of Sport, and worked with many other key stakeholders around the Kingdom. My job today is to, as I say, give you a brief introduction. I'm going to talk about the sports stakeholder map. I'm going to give a little bit of context for the day ahead before touching on the growth of the sports industry and what has driven that, and how the combination of the private and the public sector works so strongly, before showing some examples and focusing on selected key case studies. And as I say, then we'll move to some questions with David so that we can all learn from his vast experience in the sports industry. The focus of today's presentation is clearly around private sector investment and sports clubs. Now, I want to clarify that private sector investment means two things. It means both equity investment in terms of investment into a sports organisation, but also investment in terms of commercial partnerships or sponsorships, which drive the success of sports clubs, teams and franchises all around the world. Now, the sports stakeholder map is very complex, and what often happens is that people believe or think that it is focused solely on the competition structure. But as you can see here, actually, the success of sport is driven by a combination of that competition structure at the centre and strong private and public sector support in areas such as sports technology, real estate, equipment. These are all areas that are developing and growing and benefiting from the excitement of the sports competition that sits at the heart of the products that we all love to watch on television or in person in stadia. And when the sports ecosystem works well, it's a fantastic blend of three areas: the public sector providing funding and facilities, the voluntary sector, which allows events to take place, in particular participation events, but also on a match day when you have people around the stadium helping out and guiding people into their correct seats, and the private sector, which is focused quite clearly on their own commercial objectives around profitable growth, but also understands the benefit of sports impact in society and how alignment with a sports organisation really can help to benefit both the sports club but also the private company. And as I've said here, to allow all of the stakeholders to flourish, the typical and most successful sports ecosystems are a combination of those three areas. And sport is such a vehicle. It provides people with a sense of difference, achievement, and identity. And that is at the heart of any private investment, as David will come on to explain with us a little bit later. So what does that mean for the sports organisations themselves, for the clubs and the people at the heart of the competition? Well, actually, utilising all three of the sectors and segments enables a thriving sports organisation. Where the private sector can help most readily is through commercial sponsorship, driving fan attendance, and near-market services, so catering, merchandising. And I'll talk about a couple of clear examples through case studies that I've provided here. But what we've seen in the sports industry is that key sporting properties have harnessed the opportunities presented within that sports ecosystem to drive continual financial growth over a sustained time period. Now, this is a snapshot of the largest sports properties in the world and the growth that they've experienced in around about the last 6 or 7 years. If you take this back further and you go to the financial crisis in 2008, you would see a continual picture of growth through that period as well, which shows sports resilience. If we fast forwarded this chart a little bit, then we would see a dip as a result of course, the COVID-19 pandemic. But the key element to remember is that whilst no industry has been able to ride the COVID-19 pandemic without a blip, then sports will be at the centre of recovery in the future. If I pick a couple of examples from this chart, You look at NBA, the fastest growing sports property in the world, and globalizing at a quicker rate than any other sports property. They've harnessed digital technology in a way that others have been unable to do at the moment. But that doesn't mean that others haven't been able to grow as well. La Liga and Premier League, the two most popular football leagues in the world, following close behind. And the key differentiator in the Premier League is that the Premier League has been able to attract foreign investment. My own team that I support here behind me, Manchester City, of course, owned by the Abu Dhabi United Group, and the success that that has driven. But ultimately, the diversity of investment into the Premier League is what makes it such an appealing and attractive product globally to partners. And here you see the major US sports and the 5 major football leagues globally. But for all of the sports organizations that sit within these properties, what is it that they are harnessing in order to develop their growth? Now, traditionally, a sports club has had in front of them revenue generating opportunities through merchandising. So that's the sale of shirts and apparel. Match day through the sale of tickets and attendance at matches. And the commercial opportunities, the two-way partnerships, and the value that we see. Now, this has been a key differential for the biggest sports clubs in the world. The ability to drive significant commercial revenue is what makes them stand out. Of course, in the vast majority of cases, the broadcast revenue is actually outside of the control of the sports clubs themselves, and hence the reason for not really touching upon it during this presentation. But in the future, and as we stand here now, then clubs and sports organisations have really the opportunity to develop new revenue streams, in particular through technology and digital. And that probably is what makes the opportunity in Saudi Arabia so exciting. A young, digitally engaged population is going to demand and drive the best opportunities to engage with their football clubs or sports clubs in a modern and digital manner. But we must never forget that the community at which a sports club sits is absolutely critical to overall fan sentiment. And engagement locally is just as valuable as engagement internationally and globally. And sport having such a significant social value that can help governments, local councils, and organisations to achieve their objectives, be it through health or through well-being. And something that has always been at the heart of sport is player development. But in recent years, it has become more of a revenue-generating opportunity as clubs and organisations have looked to develop players as part of their business model. That's something that we expect to continue in the future with lots of long-term planning going on. But if we flick this around, what does it mean for those that are looking to invest into the sports industry? So as I say, this is both private investors and private entities who are looking to benefit from that growth that I've demonstrated through those major properties in order to achieve their own commercial objectives. Well, we believe at Deloitte there are 8 areas and 8 key benefits from investing in the sports industry. Firstly, sport is global. It's unifying, and the majority of the world's population identify with it. That's for 2 reasons. Firstly, sport typically is easy to participate in. You can pick up some sports equipment and play in the street or wherever you are in the world. But also you can engage with sport through social media or through it on your television. And the industry has such high levels of public awareness and interest. And if you look on social media platforms on any given day, then sports will be at the heart of trending content. And that is an important factor now in why the private industry is looking at sport as such a valuable opportunity. And we've seen such sustained levels of industry growth in recent years, and we expect even further growth through changing consumer habits, in particular with that digital revolution that I've touched upon. We should not forget also that growth is expected to be sustainable. Sport will always be at the heart of society, and as such, we expect it always to be a valuable proposition for both investors looking at equity investment, but also for those looking for partnerships, and that wider benefit to society, which builds benefit of association for an investor's non-sporting ventures. That brand impact of being associated with sport is huge and far outweighs any other type of industry association. And as I've touched on already, we have an industry that's been resilient to wider economic issues, making it a relatively safe bet, although we will test that a little bit with David in due course. If we look at the major sports investors around the world, the likes of Endeavour, Wonder Sports, this gives us an example of what people are looking for: the global reach, the opportunity to engage with emerging markets where sport is growing, but also where populations are developing and new trends and habits are being seen. But we're seeing a shift. What's happening now is that sports organisations are creating genuine partnerships rather than simply transactional sponsorships, where both the investors and the sports club must demonstrate the impact that they're making for each other. And that's an important factor in terms of the evolution and the value that we may see in the market in the future. For the likes of the organisations on this page, a diversified investment portfolio is key. And if you look through sports, through the evolution of sport, it now sits at the heart of people's habits. It sits at the heart of people's activities. And that means that it has longevity. And we expect to see in the future that consistent profitability for organisations that have a diversified investment portfolio is an opportunity. So let's look at some examples. Private investors coming into sports clubs is not something that is new. But what we've seen in the last probably 5 years in particular is a real shift in the emphasis and the fact that people are looking at sport as a genuine investment opportunity. And we've seen institutional investors coming into sports clubs as well. That demonstrates that these organisations believe that they can make a profit from the activity of sport in the long term. But often it doesn't work as a single standalone investment, but it works as a series of them. And then you have the large private companies who are looking for partnerships with sporting organisations. I'm sure that the team at Ministry of Sport can share these slides after the presentation, where there is more detail against each of these examples. But I just wanted to touch on a couple from around the world. Firstly, the NBA's deal with the apparel company Fanatics enables them to leverage Fanatics' global distribution, warehousing, and technological reach to ensure that wherever you are in the world, you can access NBA merchandising. This was quite a revolutionary deal when it was first struck, because the challenge of bringing merchandise into people's homes in expanding markets is one that sports organisations have been trying to solve for a number of years. And it demonstrates that where the NBA doesn't have the skills or the power itself to do that, actually a company like Fanatics can deliver. But it isn't all about scale. And the other example on here that I'd like to draw upon is the deal between Stevenage and Burger King. Now, Burger King is a global brand, and safe to say, Stevenage Football Club, with no disrespect to that football club, is not. Now, the deal that's been struck between those two organisations is one which leverages the FIFA football brand. So Burger King's exposure to Stevenage is through the FIFA game, rather than necessarily through the actual football club itself. Now, this demonstrates that for large commercial partners, there is real value to be found, even in associating with smaller sports organisations. And so I really don't want the conclusion to this presentation to be that there's only opportunities out there for the largest brands, because that simply isn't the case. So why do these deals take place? Well, there's benefits for all parties: collaborative partnerships, access to technology, a younger fan interest. What does it mean for the clubs overall? Well, it means that they have the opportunity to continue their growth and to not have to invest into the technology or into the infrastructure. It creates a stronger business model, and ultimately that key word that we're all looking for, which is sustainability. And for the investors, Well, it's the enhancement to their brand, the access to the fans, and the access to the global sports brand that provides them with a diversified portfolio that ultimately should drive greater digital exposure and commercial growth. It all sounds so easy when somebody from Deloitte puts it onto paper and sets it out as these are the key successes and how it should work. However, I'm really conscious that for the audience today at this event, it's really key to hear how this happens in practice. And if you go back to the early 1990s, then the Premier League here in England looked nothing like it does today, and certainly wasn't the commercial success that it is today. And so I'd like to introduce our special guest for today, but I know that I can't actually do him justice at all. And so we have a short video from somebody far more famous and far more impressive than me to introduce Mr. David Dein.
It is my great pleasure to welcome David Dein. David joined the Arsenal board in 1983 and was made vice chairman in the same year. He also rose to vice chairman of the Football Association and has served on numerous UEFA and FIFA committees. David was an early proponent of women's football, having been president of the hugely successful Arsenal ladies team. He was the man who had the foresight to bring the great Arsene Wenger to Arsenal in 1996. And during David's reign, the club won the League 5 times, the FA Cup 5 times, UEFA Cup Winners' Cup once, the League Cup twice, and the Community Shield 5 times, a total of 18 trophies. David was a prime mover when the Premier League was launched in 1992. As Greg Dyke, the former chairman of the FA, told the Financial Times, what he said, David Dein was the most revolutionary bloke I've met in football. David Dein created the Premier League. It was his idea. Last year, the Daily Mail published a list of the 50 most influential people in the history of the Premier League, and David Dein was up there in the top 10, rightly so, with people like Sir Alex Ferguson. These days, Mr. Dein spends much of his time speaking in businesses, schools and prisons, including students of the world-renowned Harvard Business School in Boston. David Dein was awarded the MBE by the Queen in the New Year's Honours List in recognition of his achievements. Please welcome a man I'd like to call my father and football royalty, Mr. David Dein.
Hopefully that well, I did that justice, David. Definitely better to hear from Ian Wright than myself in terms of introducing you, and thank you very much for joining us today. I don't think we should underplay that fact of your role in developing the Premier League, and I've been lucky enough to work in Saudi Arabia for a number of years, and the opportunity in sport is huge. It's absolutely huge. The popularity of sport, in particular football, is really something inspiring for us all to see. And David, your career, you operated right at the top of English football, but through a time of transition. And it's the time where its real growth began. So as you reflect on that, what do you see as your biggest success?
Well, thank you, Tim, and thank you, everybody, for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. It is an honour and a great privilege to be in your forum. And Tim, let me compliment you on your excellent, compelling and professional presentation. I must say it's the first time I've heard it, and it really hits the target well. Yes, I've had the great fortune of spending the last 40 years really at the top of the game, obviously with Arsenal, with the FA, with UEFA and FIFA. And there's been a lot of change in 40 years. And when I look back at my career, and certainly there are some key areas that I'm actually quite, I was delighted and satisfied that I could be involved with them. And particularly as Ian and you just mentioned, forming the Premier League in 1992, which really changed football in England forever. I mean, England we were going through a difficult time, remember, in the 1980s when we had hooliganism, and there was fighting inside the grounds, outside of the grounds. Women were not going to the games. So football had to change. Attendances were dropping like a stone. We had disaster with the terrible Hillsborough disaster when 96 people lost their lives. So when we decided to form the Premier League, that was a massive change for football. So that was one area which I look back with tremendous satisfaction. Another, I suppose, at Arsenal, particularly in bringing in Arsene Wenger, who he was unknown. And when we brought him in 1996, the headline in the papers was Arsenal, Arsene who? People didn't know him. And of course, today he's a household name and he's got one of the top jobs in football now. He's head of global football development for FIFA. And it doesn't get much better than that. And of course, the success that he brought with the club working with him was a joy. The fact that we had the invincible team in 2003-04, went a whole season, 49 games unbeaten. And that's quite remarkable. It hasn't been achieved since. And then also, Ian mentioned it, forming the women's team. It was, I remember when I proposed it to the board in 1990, the board said to me, is that a publicity stunt? I said, no, it's real. We want to have a women's team. And now, of course, women's football is really on the up and up. And when you consider there's over 1 million women and girls now playing football in England, that tells you the extent and the popularity of the sport. I attended the Women's World Cup in France in 2018 and 2019. It was a fantastic success. Every stadium was full and it was beamed around the world on television. So there are a few of my successes, if you like, that I'm proud of, Tim. I can talk to you all day about other things.
No, I don't doubt that you could talk to us all day about them, David. And to be honest, I could sit listening to them as well. It's fantastic learning for somebody like myself who hasn't worked in the industry for as long as you. And I think, you touched there on women's football. We've been lucky enough to work with FIFA on many of their development projects over the last 12, 18 months. And that really is at the heart of it. And the commercial opportunity there, absolutely significant. But if you look back at what you did at Arsenal Football Club, and that journey was so significant, how was the club different commercially on day one compared with when you left? What did you do to transform it into an organisation that people were proud to be associated with?
Well, Tim, when I joined the board in 1983, believe it or not, the whole turnover, the whole income of the club was £1.5 million. Today, an average squad player gets more than that. Today, the turnover of the club is 450 million. That shows you how it's risen from there. And we didn't have a commercial and marketing department. I remember having to actually form a commercial and marketing department. It was unthought of in the 1980s. In fact, we were one of the first clubs to have a sponsor. I remember with JVC, who were our first shirt sponsor.
And so was it all about the structure, David, then at that time? Was it all about implementing a sensible and repeatable approach, which meant that you could develop the club over time?
I think people didn't realise what they were sitting on, what sport really and what football could give, and the pleasure and the extent of the enjoyment that football could really give globally, and particularly in England. When I joined the board, I mean, nobody thought about really having a television contract. We got zero money at the time. There was only BBC and ITV, two terrestrial broadcasters. We didn't get any money at all. Today, the television broadcasting income for the Premier League is nearly 9 billion, not million, 9 billion pounds over 3 years. That's how it's risen. It's incredible.
Yes, absolutely staggering. So how would you sell the vision? So there's clubs in Saudi Arabia which have a huge following, both locally but also internationally. I see it on social media. How did you sell the vision to people who were looking to partner with you, that were looking to be part of the journey?
Well, I think you've got to take them on the journey, Tim. And there's a wonderful saying that eyeballs follow talent. Talent follows money, and money follows eyeballs. If you've got a good product, then all of a sudden you'll get the fans, particularly the fans will come and watch you. Then you'll get sponsors, and you've got television behind, and television drives it. Let's make no mistake about that. Television is the driving sport the driving force for any sport.
So which commercial partner then used to activate things the best with Arsenal? I remember when they had JVC on the shirt, it's Emirates and obviously the new stadium. But what did they used to do to make the most of that?
Well, I can remember signing the first contract with Nike. In fact, we were the first, Arsenal were the first football club to introduce Nike into football in England. And I remember they had a team of people going around the stadium, and wherever there was a pillar or a wall or anything they could stick a Nike logo, they would want to do it if we would allow them to. They were very, very proactive and very ambitious. And of course, we're fortunate enough now getting Emirates as our shirt sponsor and stadium sponsor. And of course, today it goes out to hundreds of millions of people. The Premier League goes out to 211 countries around the world.
Do you think that for the likes of Nike, the likes of Emirates, we touched on in the presentation a little bit about a diversified portfolio. What's kind of your view on how sponsorship with the likes of Arsenal could sit next to a sponsorship with the likes of Stevenage, for example? What's kind of driving that kind of diversity, do you think?
Well, I think it's the ambition. A sponsor will get involved if they feel that a club is ambitious and they can promote their product. That's all they want. They want eyeballs. They want to make sure their product can be seen by the public. So obviously, you've got to convince these sponsors that you have a product that they should invest in and they should get behind it and promote. Because if television sponsors actually do promote the club, right there, it helps tremendously in everything else you want to do.
And so does that need a little bit of outside the box thinking? If you go back to when you agreed that deal with Nike, that was clearly revolutionary at the time. So you've got to be innovative, is what you're saying, really. You've got to kind of really think about how you can deliver to that sponsor.
And I think it's got to be a true partnership. It shouldn't be just one way. It's not a question of just taking the money. It's a question you've got to be fair. It's got to be a contract which is workable to both parties. Whenever I sat down at the table, I would always make sure, what do you want out of I would always ask them, what do you want out of our sponsorship? And then I would tell them what we expect out of the partnership. So it's a two-way street. Whenever you're looking at sponsorship, and even television broadcasting, because television would like, if they could, to be everywhere all the time. They could be very intrusive. They would like to be in the dressing room at halftime, at full time. They want to hear what the manager's going to say. Well, there has to be certain criteria and certain rules and regulate how they operate.
So you use the key word really in terms of, if I'm advising my client base around sponsorship agreements, be that clubs or major corporates, the key word is partnership. And how do we create something that's genuine, that's long-standing, that means that both parties can benefit? So what would your advice be to a significant corporate organisation that is considering a partnership in the sports industry? What would you be saying to them?
I think the first thing is that it has to be a long-term relationship. You're not looking for a short fix, because that's not how the game works. It's always got to be at least a minimum of 3, 5, sometimes 7-year contract to make sure you've got time to enjoy each other's company, to develop together. It is a marriage, and it has to work that way. And I have to say, at Arsenal, we always had very long contracts. They always extended, they rolled on for years to year, because we felt that we were giving good value and they felt they were getting good value.
And in today's society, if you look at the role of data and the role of social media, do you think that the partnerships of the future kind of are more transcending of the entire fan base almost? You need to find a way to engage across social media, across television, across new channels, across the shirt front still, across merchandising. There's a lot to do, isn't there? How do you kind of focus and make sure that those arrangements are as good as they can be?
Well, I think, Tim, that all comes down to when you're sitting down to seal a deal for a contract, what both parties expect out of it, as I said before. And today, the sponsors got so many opportunities with social media and television and what's going on around the world today. It is so interesting. People say to me, well, what's going on in football? We've seen such an explosion in television. Where do you see it going? Well, frankly, I'm still bullish. I still think that the market is still buoyant. and it will go even further. And I always encourage people who want to get involved in football clubs. I say to them, yes, look very carefully, try and go with a journey. Obviously, you want to be successful, but if you get it right, there's no end. You see, people have got invested in football clubs, like the people who bought into big clubs like Arsenal and Manchester United, they've made a fortune on their investment. Now, it wasn't necessarily intended to, in the first instance, they were going to make a lot of money out of it, but certainly their assets have improved dramatically.
I think I can probably guess the answer to this question then. So if you look at it from both commercial partnerships and you look at it from an equity investment perspective, is it a good investment?
Well, the first thing you've got to say, it can be, but it all depends on one word. Like any business, it's management. It's getting the right team in place, both on the field and off the field. And that's where Deloitte and yourself, Tim, have to guide people, because they need professional advice on how to do it. You know, football clubs, it's not like investing in a company that makes car parts or desks or something. You're dealing with a body which it's almost a human organism. It affects people's lives. Football club, right? You know, from you're a fan of Man City. I'm a fan of Arsenal. I'm still crying about Saturday, by the way. How it affects our lives. So it's not quite the same as investing in something else, an inanimate object. You're investing in the heart and soul of people's emotions. You've got to give it something called TLC, tender, loving care. And that's where some owners go wrong. They don't give it enough personal attention.
And the reward is seemingly huge. You know, you must have had some amazing times kind of sat watching Arsenal and feeling very proud and really kind of getting some personal enjoyment as well as professional satisfaction, I imagine.
Yes, and you know, I wake up every morning, when I look in the mirror, I always say, get a winning team. If you get a winning team, everything else is easy.
I'm lucky to enjoy a winning team at the moment, and it's very enjoyable. I can assure you. It is a little bit of a question, David. We're obviously you're very focused on football for understandable reasons, you know. But today is about sport as well as you know, more generally in the kind of the power of sport. Why do you think other sports maybe haven't been able to kind of keep up with the pace of development of football? What do you think it is that makes football stand apart?
Well, I think firstly, everybody plays football. It's the game that one of the reasons is it's so easy. You have a ball. You can put 4 coats down or pullovers down, and you've got 22 players and you've got a game. I mean, so the equipment, is fairly easy to play. So everybody normally, it's a thing that we all start playing. And once youngsters start playing at an early age and they go to a football ground at an early age, they're caught for life. Tim, you must have gone to Manchester City when you're 8, 9, 10 years of age, like I went to Arsenal, and you're hooked. It's the story. It's wonderful. You've probably read the book or seen the film, Fever Pitch, the Nick Hornby film. And that tells the stories. You go to the ground, you get hooked with the colour, the spectacle, the noise, the chanting, right? It's theatre. I call it theatre without a script. And we go every week. So I went to the Etihad Stadium on Saturday with a little bit of apprehension, but thinking we could get a result maybe, right? And the adrenaline is flowing. Then you come back at the end of the game, you've got one side happy and the other side not so happy, but then you hope that next time it'll be different.
Absolutely. It's the hope that kills you, David. It's the hope that kills you. If we step back and we bring this into a bit more of a Saudi Arabian context, football and sport in Saudi Arabia is in a development phase. There's no doubt about it. I myself, as I say, have witnessed the power that it can harness and the opportunity. But it is quite similar, very different challenges to what was facing you in the 1990s in England. But it is quite similar in terms of where it's at in its development phase. As I say, definitely not with similar challenges, but kind of what the road might look like ahead. So if you had the chance to make one decision again that this audience can learn from, what would it be? What would you do differently?
Well, and I think this is very much your territory, Tim, because you're going to be advising them, presumably, on their next stage of their sporting lives. But firstly, just looking at the bare facts, Saudi, if I'm not mistaken, they're 61 in the FIFA ranking. It's too low. They've got a population of 35, 36 million people. They should be doing a lot better than that. When you consider Croatia, with only a small population of 4 million, they were runners-up in the World Cup in 2018. So there's a tremendous room for development in Saudi. And it's a question of harnessing the population, getting them interested, getting them early, getting the right coaches in. You've got to have the right equipment. It all starts at grassroots. Let's cut it down to the basic things, right? You've got to get it right in the schools to make sure the schools are playing football, to make sure people are interested, to make sure they've got the right equipment and the right coaches. And there is a pathway through so that youngsters can see that they can get to the top.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because in Saudi Arabia at the moment, a highly engaged young population who love watching their sport, and you really hope that kind of in the coming years, those developmental opportunities, the strategy of the Saudi Arabian Football Federation and aligned to the private sector with academies and be it the school program as well. You know, we're really hopeful that development can come in due course. You now almost have a bit of a broader remit, though, the way that you look at sport. You go into prisons and into the community to provide your expertise and support to people who perhaps, you know, have maybe lost their way a little bit, shall we say. I think this is the definition, though, of the true power of sport, isn't it? And
yes.
Sorry, go on, David.
No, I'm pleased you touched on that, Tim, because it's a stage of my life, I call it the years of significance, when I'm giving something back. And I came up with this idea. I was giving talks in schools, motivational talks in schools, and that led into talks into prisons. And when I saw what was going on in prisons, and it's the same around the world, the offenders are not stimulated. So consequently, you've got the same people keep coming back into prison again. Well, you need to stop that revolving door. And when I looked at it carefully, I thought, well, what are football clubs doing in prison? And the answer was nothing. And I developed this idea, I called it the Twinning Project, which is a charity I started 3-4 years ago, where I wanted to twin a football club, a professional football club, with a local prison, where the football club will put coaches in to help some of the offenders, to give them an opportunity to get a job when they come out afterwards. Today, believe it or not, within 3 years, we have 70 professional football clubs twinned with a local prison. It's been one of the most rewarding things I've ever done in my life, Tim.
That's the definition of a true partnership, isn't it, David?
It really is, because I'm seeing it working both ways. And the people who deliver the courses, they feel that they're getting something from it, and the recipients feel that they're getting something from it. And that is what it's about.
And that combination then, as we talk about a football club, any sports organisation partnering with the community, and it wouldn't necessarily need to be a prison, it can be schools, it can be other programmes in the community. Absolutely. Are you seeing kind of commercial partners really engage with that?
In fact, we're seeing more and more of that, because every football club in England has a charitable foundation, an arm, which does football schools, goes to hospitals. It's something because they need to engage with the local community, because this is their fan base. It'd be daft not to. What is the game without the fans?
And what's the reaction of the fans? What's the reaction of the people when they hear about, you know, the impact their club is having, the association with a commercial partner? How do they talk about it?
Oh, it's very positive. Well, you can see how many football fans today wear the jerseys, the shirts of the club with the sponsors on. They're proud of it. It's their identity. You know, let's be fair. Football is tribal, right? You're a Man City fan. You're very proud, particularly when they're winning, to wear a Man City shirt. And that's the association. It's devoted loyalty. It doesn't have, you know, people change the cars they drive, they change their television sets and everything. They never change their loyalty to a football club. Once you're a football fan of a club, that's it for life. It's unique.
No, it really is, isn't it? It's that the tribalism has some negatives in some ways, but I must admit that the ability to engage, I would give my club all the data in the world about me that they ever needed so that they could make better decisions to send me the latest shirt or get me the latest tickets or whatever it might be. And I always talk about the loyalty of fans being almost verging on unhealthy sometimes. But for a commercial partner, that's huge, isn't it? And no matter where the trends go in the future, so whatever the platform is, if it's a digital platform, if it's the mobile first approach, the fundamentals of a commercial partnership are never going to change, are they?
That's correct. But it's not an overnight success. I think particularly when you've got in Saudi, you've got the opportunity there with, as I say, you've got a big population, but to really develop into a world force, it's going to take 5 to 10 years. Absolutely. It's not going to happen overnight. These things they evolve. It needs nurturing. It's all about the coaching and I come back to the tender loving care again. And it can be done. I've seen it done in many countries. You look at small countries, even like Belgium and Switzerland, all of a sudden they're doing really well on the international stage with small populations because they've put a lot of effort and a lot of work into it.
It's absolutely fascinating, David, about how the sports ecosystem, aligns and joins up in order to create success for everybody, and be it the government, be it the private enterprises, be it the sports organisation, and be it the individuals, either the fans or the people who are volunteering to go to make major sporting events happen. I'm conscious of time. We're nearly at the end of our agenda slots here. So if you had one message really to kind of leave for this audience in light of the objective of today, bringing together potential commercial partners with sports organisations, what would your final message be?
Well, I think that they've got to, like they're doing with yourselves, have professional guidance on the way forward, but also to have a program, a proper plan, a 5 to 10 year plan for the future. And to stick with it, be bold enough, and it needs financing. There's no doubt. You're not to get anywhere unless you put the money into it. That's for sure, because you need the resources to kickstart it. But the dividends can be there if you're prepared to put the investment in.
Excellent, David. Well, on a personal note, it's been fascinating to sit and chat with you. It's quite surreal doing it virtually. It feels as though nobody's there and it's just us two having a chat. But it's nice to know that it's going live out on YouTube and also to the audience in Riyadh today. Thank you, David, very much for your time. I hope that you all have a fantastic day ahead. At Deloitte, we remain committed to the development of Saudi Arabian sport, and so please, feel free to add me on LinkedIn. Jemana, the event organizer, will share my email with anybody who would like to discuss any of the topics further today. And good luck with your event. Good luck with the day, and I hope it's a prosperous future for Saudi Arabian sport.
Thank you. It's been a great pleasure and an honour to be with you. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
شكرا لديفيد وشكرا لتيموثي او تيم، هو يقولنا ادري تيم. شكرا لهم، ان شاء الله انه تحققت الفائده المرجوه، لان نعرف ان ديليوث لهم شراكه مستمره مع المشرعين في الرياضه السعوديه، وايضا حتى مع الجهات التنفيذيه. واليوم هم اعتقد قدموا لنا تجربه دوليه حقيقيه، تجارب الاتحاد الانجليزي للدوري الانجليزي، واحنا يعني في مثل هالتجارب اكيد يعني راح نستفيد منها من ناحيه، ومن ناحيه اخرى انه الحراك الجديد اللي صاير في الرياضه هو ينطلق من هذا من حيث وصل العالم في هذا الجانب. نكتفي في الجزء الاول من هذا الملتقى بما شاهدته الان. نترك لكم ربع ساعه نصلي فيها، ونزعجكم شوي بعد. طيب نصلي فيها، وان شاء الله بعد ربع ساعه من الان راح نرجع هنا ونبدا الجلسات الحواريه، وبعدها ان شاء الله ورشه العمل.